Hey, good morning, Detroit. Is the $2 trillion Build Back Better bill dead or ready to roll? The infrastructure bill, that's a done deal. And if the $1.25 trillion does not come from economic growth based on the projects implemented, well, you will pay for it in new taxes or it will be slapped onto the national debt. Now Democrats' attention turns to Build Back Better, a $2 trillion social safety net bill. Is BBB something the country wants or something we need? Will it really be paid for by the rich and corporations? Will it help or will it hurt the economy? If you had a vote, would you say yay or nay on Build Back Better? Give us a call at 1-800-859-0957, 1-800-859-0WJR. We begin with Dave Dulio, director of the Center for Civic Engagement and political science professor at Oakland University. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Good morning, Kevin. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Lawmakers are going to turn their attention to Build Back Better. Do you think they've read the bill and know what's in it?
I'm not even sure the bill is done yet. I think that we're waiting on so many things around this legislation, including I think the most notable development in the last several days is the commitment by House moderates to vote for it if it meets their approval after seeing what the Congressional Budget Office says about the true cost of it. And I think that that's where the next flashpoint in this is going to be. If that number comes back from the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, and they do excellent work to score these bills, that's going to be the next point of contention, whether or not things move forward or stall again.
How do they make that determination? Because it comes in and they talk about, hey, this is a $2 trillion bill, and then they say, well, wait, it's not really $2 trillion, it's really $4 trillion. How do they come up with an equation? I know you don't know exactly, but generally speaking.
Well, and it, there's a formula that I'm sure they use or algorithms, but I think the important part of that is not the specifics of it, but the fact that they use assumptions, right? And assumptions about economic growth, assumptions about the cost of things, and all of that will then spit out a number. So there is room for this to be sort of malleable, if you will. But the CBO does its best to try to score it in a realistic and rational way. And the assumptions is where you can see some others will come out and say, oh, it's only 1.75 trillion, and then another group or member of Congress will come out and say, well, it's actually 4 trillion. Well, what they're doing is changing the assumptions that go into that equation.
And really, that sort of is the deal with the 1.2 trillion infrastructure deal as well. They say it should be paid for if the assumptions come through on the growth based on the projects that are done. But if it doesn't, we're going to have to put it on. We're going to have to add it to the deficit, or we're going to have to increase taxes somewhere along the way to pay for the infrastructure bill. With this one, they say if it does, whatever the price comes out, they say they're going to pay for it entirely with through corporations paying more money and people making over $400,000 a year. That's an assumption too that money's not going to trickle down somehow.
Well, and it assumes that there's going to be this influx of money, right, and to the federal coffers, which again is this. There's no guarantee of that, and the way, and I'm no economist, right, but I have to imagine that as we see inflation continue to rise, biggest jump in I think 30 years as of the other day, from October last year to October this year. That has to call into question some of those assumptions about what kind of revenue is going to be generated from actually both of these bills.
So when you look at the politics of it, we heard President Biden this morning talking about how he's going to start focusing on the economy, that he hears the American people. He's going to do something about this. It's obviously a big issue for Republicans and Democrats. On infrastructure, is that a win for him as it relates to the economy? It's got to be a win in that he got something done.
It is definitely a win because they got something done. And I think that, the worst case scenario for the White House and Democrats in Congress would have been if that vote failed in the House. which, you know, it's really interesting the way that played out with still 6 Democrats voting no on that bill. The 6 of the progressive caucus said no to that. Really only saved by the 13 Republicans that voted for it. But whether it's a win on the economy is yet to be determined, again, because all we have thus far is assumptions. And, you know, the president, I think it's smart for him to say to the American public, look, I hear you, we're going to start working on the economy. But frankly, there's not a whole lot that the president himself can do to drive the U.S. economy. It's not like you know, he's in there with a video game controller. There are very few tools that the president has to impact the economy on a daily basis so people feel it.
Americans feel like investing in infrastructure is crucial. It's important. We don't want the grids to go down. We don't want the roads to fall apart. We don't want our bridges falling on top of us. All of that. The Build Back Better, where do you think the support is for that, if there is support for that with the American people?
Yeah, you know, I think, and both sides can point to polling that backs up their position, right? And I think you see. And it's not terribly surprising. The overall big picture items that are in Build Back Better are generally supported by the public. But as you dig down into the details of what's included in, say, the measures to deal with climate change, or the cost of the measures to deal with climate change, support then all of a sudden slips quite a bit. So people are generally supportive of the themes that are in that bill, but are a little skeptical of what to do about them.
So do you think the Republicans will come out and point out all of these specifics, these details that show that this is a really bad idea, or will they lay back and let the Democrats decide what they're going to do, since they have the votes anyway, and say, well, they passed this, now you have to pay for it, you have to deal with it, or will they get in front of it and try and block it?
Oh, I think they'll try and block it, and there's not much that just Republicans can do, right? Because they don't have the votes themselves to block it. Republicans need folks like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema to keep up their opposition to this bill, at least in its in maybe one of the previous versions. We'll see if Manchin and Sinema can strike a deal that makes the progressive group in the Congress happy. If the Senate can get something that the House is okay with. But I also think that Republicans are going to do everything they can to point out what they see as problems in the bill. Just go back to when there was talk about the Green New Deal and all of the items that were routinely discussed by Republicans that were in that made people sit up and take notice and say, well, hang on a second, I didn't know that was included.
All right, Dave Dulio, Director for the Center of Civic Engagement and Political Science Professor at Oakland University. Thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you, Kevin.
All right, we'll talk real soon. Your calls are next. We're going to open up the phone lines. What do you think about Build Back Better? Are you ready to add that onto the infrastructure deal, or is it just too expensive facing all the economic problems we have right now? 1-800-859-0957, 1-800-859-0WJR. You're listening to the Great Voice